No mai, haere mai. Welcome everyone. I'm going to open with karakia timatanga. Tu taua mai e runga, tu taua mai e raro, tu taua mai e roto, tu taua mai e waho. Kia tau ai te mauri ora ki te katoa, haumia, huia, tai kia. Kia ora koutou, I'm Kate and I'm one half of Thriving Communities and I'm dialing in from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, and joining me on this webinar is the other half, Tammy, who is dialing in from Te Whanganui Atara in Wellington. I'm so delighted you've all been able to join to hear about the work that we've done to better support people in financial difficulty, particularly those who are seeking support via financial mentors. And look, we'd love to know who you are. We don't have time to let everyone introduce themselves, so perhaps just pop into the chat who you are, where you're dialing in from, and we can just make sure that everyone knows who's on this call. And while you're doing that, there's just a bit of housekeeping. So you will have seen that we are recording this webinar, that the recording and the slides and the links will all be sent out in the next 48 hours. And what we are asking of you is if you could please hold any questions that you have about the content that we're about to share until the very end, because some of those questions that you have might be answered as we work through the content. So hold all questions until the end, but there will be some time at the end to clarify anything or to work through any questions that you might have. Tammy, can I just get you to move through the slides? Thank you. We'll go to the next one. So what is Thriving Communities? So I can see a bunch of names on this webinar and I've not met you. So it's really wonderful to have you here. We'll tell you a little bit about Thriving Communities. As many of you will be aware, some of the trickiest problems don't belong to one organisation or one sector. And those problems kind of sit between, the systems and the processes. And what we've found is that responses are often quite ad hoc or fragmented across the sectors. And so what Thriving Communities does is bring together organisations from across business, government, community to work on shared challenges that no single organisation or sector can solve alone. And we do this by bringing people together, and that might be through workshops like the one that we held at the end of last year up here in Tamaki Makaurau. It might be virtually or in other ways. We look at the gaps and what the fragmentation is in the system and sort of get to clearly articulate what the problem is to be solved. We scope. Sometimes it's doing some groundwork around feasibility and viability of a project, and not everything, moves through or moves forward. So we scope practical collaborative projects, and then we support collective action. And this photo is from our workshop at the end of last year. So we had about 40 organisations attend and work through a few different things that were going on in the sector at the time. So here's our plan on a page. So I'll get Tammy to move through to the next slide. This is our plan on a page. I'm not going to go through this. This is quite detailed. And that was the plan on a page for 2025. It's since been updated, but we were working on 3 projects at the time. One being this project, so the interim identity verification of financial mentors. So this webinar is effectively the closing of that project. And as you'll see, our next area of focus is economic and financial safety with a priority on older New Zealanders. And I'll share a little bit more about that at the end of the webinar. But one of the issues when we were having conversations with different organisations last year, one of the issues that kept coming up in the context of, how might organisations better support people in financial difficulty, one of the issues was that, and we were hearing this from financial mentors, from disputes organisations and essential service businesses, was that privacy waivers or authority to act forms were difficult to accept or difficult to get accepted, and they weren't necessarily going through as quickly or as smoothly as they should. And look, we know not all financial mentors have this issue, and not all businesses have this issue. Some said they had no trouble at all, or that it was just a couple of different organisations that were challenging to work with. But what we were effectively hearing is that it was quite ad hoc. There wasn't really a sort of systems level approach to tackling this issue. And at the same time, what we were seeing is the increased vigilance, particularly from the business sector, around sharing data and information. And that's in the face of increased fraud and scams and abuse. And this is a compliance comment that was issued in August last year by the Privacy Commissioner, or the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, which noted that utilities in particular were perhaps not being as rigorous as they could when it came to sharing customer data with third parties. So there is increased awareness within the sector now, and we recognise that unless we really leaned into this issue, businesses were really going to struggle with accepting privacy waivers moving forward unless there was a process for checking the identity of the financial mentor that was sending it to them. So look, I'd like to thank, we've worked with a range of different organisations to find what we're calling a pragmatic and an interim solution. So we've worked with FinCap, DebtFix, other budget services, the Telecommunications Dispute Resolution, the Telecommunications Forum, and 1NZ in particular to help with the process development. And look, I'm delighted to hand over now to Tammy, who has done a lot of the heavy lifting and had hundreds of conversations with people over the last couple of months, and she'll walk you through our recommended interim approach. Thanks, Tammy.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you for everyone that's attending today. So I just thought by way of a start, I'd give you sort of an overview of what the financial mentor sector looks like at the moment. It is estimated now that there are about over 750 financial mentors and 183 services across Aotearoa. You'll see that next stat is the next two stats will become more apparent as this presentation moves forward. But 89 services are currently MSD funded, which have 436 financial mentors, and 94 services are not funded by MSD, which have about 323 financial mentors. This, as I said, becomes more significant as we move through the presentation. As Kate has said, please put any questions you have in the chat, and we will have time to go through them at the end of the presentation. So building on from what Kate said, when we sat down and we thought, okay, a solution for being able to verify financial mentors and financial services existence, that sounded within itself quite a big slab. So when we sat down and we thought about it, we asked ourselves, is there a pragmatic way to assist businesses with verifying identity of financial mentors and services while Tāpapa is being implemented? And I just want to spend just a little bit on that within itself. So I think the big thing, and Kate said as well, that I would like to ask everybody in attendance to really keep front in mind is that this is a pragmatic solution and that this is an interim solution. Many of you will be aware that FinCap is going through the professionalisation program, Te Tāpapa, and this process that we're speaking now will be formalized and integrated with that project going forward. And the other element I want to speak around here is identity of financial mentors and services. That's a big thing. What we are putting forward here is a simple way to look at identity alone. There is no questions about competency or anything along those lines. That again is a question for FinCap in terms of Te Tāpapa and that process. So once we'd sort of put that all together, we figured we would look at something with an independent and reliable identification process. So the key questions were around, there needs to be a process for identification, and then there needs to also be verifiable and reliable contact details. So an email and mentor, product email and service email and mentor verification. And then we thought to ourselves, okay, what could this look like? And in our minds, we sort of came up with two things. First of all, there has to be infrastructure. So something's got to exist and something's got to be accessible. So we said, okay, that needs to look like some sort of central database. Okay, there's got to be some hardware there. Then we said, okay, in order to maintain that sort of trust, etc., this database has to be updated regularly and consistently. It also needs to be a trusted source. That was a big thing. It needs to be a trusted source. And it needs to have some sort of formal process that we can stand up and say, this is how the financial mentor at a service is identity verified, and this is how the service has been verified. So those were sort of the things that we kept in our mind, the whole way through. And then we sat down and we said, okay, if we had this, what would success ultimately look like? And I think success is the same for everybody sitting in this forum, in this presentation right now, in this webinar right now. We're all looking to be able to offer quicker and more effective assistance to vulnerable customers. So this sort of really framed up what we were thinking, how we were thinking, and how we were going to approach this whole thing. So the next thing we looked at, we said, okay, well, this is how we've now got a framework, which is great. So now what we need to do is we need to scope this project. And I just want to spend a little bit of time on this around sort of making sure that people are aware of what we could deliver and how it is delivered. So first of all, when we sat down and we looked at things that were in scope, we said, well, obviously part of this project would have to be exploring various options. What is available? What is out there? And second is we actually have to propose it, which is what we're doing. And then third, we had to do the implementation of this proposal, which is what we've got here and what we're going to share with you. And then running through this consistently and all the time, as that Kate spoke to as well, is stakeholder engagement. I had many and long conversations with a lot of you that are on this call today, and I thank you for your time. When we thought about what was out of scope, I want to tie this again with the limitations, because I think these two really speak to each other. And as I said in the beginning, out of scope completely is any sort of assessing of competence. So just that gets parked completely up right now. One of the things we heard of a lot was build new platforms. And we will talk about it we did actually look at it, even though it was out of scope. We did actually say, okay, what we could look at. But the big thing with building new platforms are incredibly expensive. Building new platforms being incredibly expensive would require us to go and look for funding at the same time that FinCap has said this is part of our process that we're going to do taking forward, and they have identified their own funding runways and plans, as this is now the wider part of their wider work as this formalization process. Again, not doing any physical verification ourselves. We're not going to design privacy waivers, even though some of our engagements around this has led to sectors thinking about their privacy waivers, and just reiterating there that we're not involved with the Tāpapa process, that's FinCap. And that really ties just straight into those limitations. We at Thriving Communities, it is not for us to build or host. For everybody, resource is a big thing, and the funding, as we all know, the funding environment is very tight at the moment. And yeah, we're not going to undermine programs that are already in train. Okay, so then what we did is we had a look at, obviously, now we had to start looking at options. And what were the options that were available? So we looked at sort of two ways. We looked at it, what we explored and what was discounted, and then what we explored and what could be included. So what we did in terms of the establishing of a new database, which I've already chatted about, and that's, again, just brought up by those limitations. We couldn't do it. It requires resource. There was a whole question around who verifies the identity. And even I think it's worthwhile to take a note beyond this, was even if we did stand up this new database, it would require people being comfortable with having financial mentors, for example, being comfortable to have their information hosted somewhere. And that brings up a whole conversation within itself. Then it would need a home. Where would it sit? require continually and sustained funding. We go back to that whole thing, resource consistency. It would take quite a bit of time. And again, in line with what FinCap is doing in professionalisation, that's in its own time frame. And then realistically, a very high risk of redundancy going forward. So it was just not going to be an adequate use of resources. So scoping, so just to put to bed the whole idea of a new database, I just wanted to, let's say, put that out there. So then what we did is when we looked at, databases, we said to ourselves, all right, so we need to look at two things, as I said in the previous slide. What is the identification verification processes that are in place? So that's, does this service exist, and is this person actually a financial mentor there? And again, around that infrastructure. So I know the initial, conversations were around Money Talk, and FinCap had a list, and we did engage quite extensively with FinCap around this. And while, for example, Money Talks has that external facing infrastructure, what we did come across is not necessarily all services choose to be listed, or some have chosen to be delisted due to resource constraints, etc. When we engaged with FinCap about making this list sort of, to the standard where we would have this identity verification process in as part of it, it would obviously be very labor intensive, and it's just lack of resources to do this type of work now. So the infrastructure question was it was there. The infrastructure was there. We could, that was something we could look at. But the big thing that I think we also sort of just stopped us with that was around the whole thing of that independent verification of financial mentors and services in their totality. There is no current requirement for formal verification of financial mentors working at a service. It's not to say this doesn't happen, please. It's just it's not a requirement. So we could not stand up in this presentation and say to you definitively, this is the process. At the moment, there's no sort of universal framework for that. And of course, that will obviously be unpacked as part of the professionalisation program. And we did have a look a bit around identification programs like Real Me or digital identity services. And just straight off the bat, these are just not feasible at the moment. And again, just circling back to that thing, which I've said a whole lot, is that it's part of professionalisation. So these were the ones that was discounted. So the database, or the process, the database that we went through, that we looked at, and we thought, is there something out there that exists that has infrastructure and would be able to satisfy this identity requirement, that verification of identity? Is there something that exists out there that's perhaps wider than financial mentors? So it's not literally listed, it can be wider than financial mentors. And while we were going through this process, we've come up with a database that we would like to put to you, and a process around it. So what we came about, and I'm not too sure if many people are familiar with this, but this is the Family Services Directory that is hosted by MSD. And what I'm going to do now in terms of the webinar, you will all have this deck, it will be available to you, but I want to spend a little bit of time actually on the database itself, so I can go through the information that is available and the processes that are associated to it. And as we go through this, I want to just reiterate to people that this is a pragmatic interim solution. I know that there might have been ideas of big database builds, etc., but we've sort of gone through why that's not feasible at the moment. But we do think that this could really support your requirements. It must be, I just want to state this up front also, that this is all voluntary. We are not saying that any of this is cast in stone. It's just a way to support your approaches to verifying identities of financial mentors and services. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time. I'm going to click through to the Family Services Directory, and I'm just going to go through some of the points there. So let's hope this works. I'm about to leave Canva. So exciting. All right, there we are. There's the Family Services Directory. So the first thing I want to talk about, remember I've been speaking this whole time about these two elements. The one is infrastructure and the one is the identity verification process. So answering that question about, is this appropriate in terms of infrastructure? Yes, it is. It is hosted by the Ministry of Social Development. It has a long history in it. It is a directory that is publicly available, and it provides people with a list of or access to a lot of services. You can just look at this front page here. The first one, which is building financial capability, which is what we'll focus on. But you can see their community connectors, food services, employment, housing. This database sort of has it all. But like I say, we're focusing on just the one element. It's consistently updated. The information is updated, and when I take you through a listing, we'll be able to show you the date that it's uplisted. The MSD directory has sustained funding and sustained resource allocation. When we spoke to MSD about this, they actually have a person that's appointed that their role is to ensure, well, more than one, but it's their role to ensure this is updated, relevant, etc. And also to be listed on the financial services directory, you actually have to go through an application process. So it's not just, hey, yo, you're on. So just in terms of looking at this building financial capability, because this is really what we are looking for. So building financial capability is MSD, Ministry of Social Development's aspect that provides funding for financial mentors. And that will become apparent, that will become important in just a bit. But in terms of these listings that you have here, so I have picked some that I'm going to show you, but basically the only reason any of these are listed is because they are the most easy to look at. So for example, you would look up, if you've got this form for Bay Financial Mentors, here is the information at the library that is presented to you. So when you go onto the database, you look it up, you get this listing that looks like that. And behind it, there's even more information if that's what you want. But what I wanted to bring your attention to is, if you look at the information now, remember the big things that were brought to our attention was we need a way to check that our email addresses for services are legitimate, and we need to know that that formal identification verification has happened. And this is what these listings give you. And the first thing I want to talk about, because this speaks a lot to that ID question, is when you see this classification called BFC on a listing. So what happens is services can receive funding from the Ministry of Social Development. And when you see this BFC classification, it means that a service is funded. And in order for a service to be funded to offer financial capability services, excuse me, I'm going to go back to my presentation now, so let's just hope it links back nicely, that BFC note there. When a service is required to be listed, you'll see this is just what I've shown you. They are required to get accreditation from Kahui Kaho, and this is the government agency that provides social service accreditation. And why is this important when you want to verify the identity of a financial mentor and the legitimacy of financial service, financial mentoring service, my apologies, when you receive a form, is around that highlighted aspect we've got there called staffing. So in order to get accreditation, the Kahui Kaho has a whole list of things that you've got to provide evidence for. And this thing is around staffing. And that specific staffing element in terms of the verification of the identity of financial mentors is that each person that works in that service, mentor and otherwise, has to go through at the very minimum Ministry of Justice or police vetting. And part of that process is the requirement that there is evidence of the person's identity. So when you have a service that has BFC listing attached to it, we're able to say to you today that that service will have gone, that the staff at that service will have gone through the vetting process as required by MSD, which is at a minimum police clearance, a police vetting or MOJ requirements or vetting. So this exists in terms of all the lists otherwise that are going on here. So that's the one element of it. So then what we do is we said, okay, so we can say if there's a BFC listed organization, we can say to you, okay, in terms of that verification component that you have about, is this mentor who works here actually a person, and this is, you know, above board, we then had within that scope of BFC, that they are BFC accredited, we found sort of two groups. And the first group was those that had email addresses that were tied directly to the service. So, for example, what you do is you've got here admin@bfm.org.nz. That BFM is a domain that is associated directly with that service. And what this meant was when a business or interested party receives a privacy waiver from a financial mentoring service, and they can see it's BFC, they can also do a direct a check on whether the email address that was used in the sending of that privacy waiver matches the domain that is provided in the listing. And then that helps to be able to satisfy that the email is legitimate. So if you just have a look here, what we've got on the right-hand side is this enables organizations to cross-check the email address on the privacy waiver, which was sent against the listed email address. So you've got that question answered around legitimacy of identity, and then you've got that question around, the authenticity of the email address if you match them back to what's on the listing. That was the first group. The second group we have here with those BFC funded was the guys that don't have specific addresses that are the domains are the same as the service. These are the ones that are using Google, or in this case Extra, and there's 6 of these services. And what this basically is, it's a general domain, and what we do have coming up in a little bit is how this can be used in practice. It's sort of we have a decision tree that we will go through. But one of the things that when we engaged around was what could be done is in an event like this is that an email could be sent to the service that's listed here, the address that's listed here, with the subject mentor identity check verified. And one of the things, this could be one of the ways the business could do it, is then to reach out to the service using this email address and to confirm that this is all and above board. And then this brings us to the next group and an important group. Excuse me, sorry. I don't know why this tends to happen when I speak. So when you've got those that have BFC tags, we can say to you this verification process is happening in background. However, there's a large number of financial mentoring services that are not BFC funded, and not being BFC funded has nothing to do with anything more than simply this is not their funding source. Many of these places are part of wider organizations or get their sourcing out elsewhere. The only reason we've pulled this out as being important is because unlike those that have BFC tags, we can't tell you sitting here today anything about the identity verification processes of these services. And I can go pretty much out on a limb and say I'm pretty sure most of them do have vetting processes. We just don't know what they are. So again, we will speak to a little bit in a while about the decision tree. But when we have a service that has the information here on the listing, but not necessarily the BFC classification, what we can recommend, and again, I'll spend some time on that decision tree, was following up with the service to see if the email listed and the person that's sending the email, sending the application, the privacy waiver, checking that this is all above board. There was something that I haven't brought your notice to now, sorry, but I've just seen it now. If you look at the bottom, you will see that there is the updated, you will see where it says updated. Here we've got a listing that was updated on the 12th of January 2026. So you can just see that when last this was updated. So what we have now here is we have this way that we can propose that businesses or interested parties could use to supplement their own current processes. So what we do have is we've taken some time and we've put together a decision tree that we, would like to put forward and just as a way to possibly think about this. So this is just a practical way, and again, we will be looking at those three areas. The first being those that are three types: those that are BFC funded with an email address that matches the domain of the organization, those that are BFC funded that do not have emails that match the domain, and then those that are not BFC funded. So the process that we're putting forward would look pretty much as follows. So the organization receives a privacy waiver from a financial mentor. This would be standard for everybody, would be sent through, regardless of waiver would be accepted. What you could do is once you've received the waiver, you could then open the Family Services Directory and look up the service and get the listing in front of you. What you can do is when you look at that listing, you can see, okay, is this a BFC funded listing? Remembering that BFC funding tells you that independent vetting has taken place. And if so has this independent vetting taking place? Yes. What you can do then is you can check the email address and the privacy waiver was sent from and see if it exactly matches that listing and not necessarily from a generic email or extra domain. If the answer is yes, then the financial mentor works for an accredited service with staff vetting procedures. If the answer is no, and it is a service that's using, for example, a Google or Gmail, so one of those 6 ones, but it's still BFC funded, what can happen then is a way that this could be used then is then to email the service directly using the information provided in the listing to check on the financial mentor's identity. One of the things that was proposed not proposed, but something that we know has been used or can be used is in the event that a service is not a service is not a BFC funded, for example. One of the organizations that we've spoken to and we'll go through is actually one of the things you can do. And again, this is all about comfort level for all parties involved. So I'm just going to say this. One of the things that can be done is a business could possibly engage with that service or the wider organization, come up with, with arrangements around that. But one of the things that was said was, okay, if we could just get comfort from the organization that that there is a policy that exists, that this vetting is taking place, even though they're not BFC funded, this vetting is taking place. That can also be used as a safeguard in business, in businesses' processes. They could actually then know what that non-BFC funded vetting process is and be satisfied according to that. And then, that could be then used in sort of the same framework as someone that is BFC vetted. That is BFC accredited, that's undergone the external vetting. Oh, it had to happen. I knew it was going to happen. Sorry, my arrows seem to change. All right, so that deals with those cohorts that are, for example, BFC funded, and those that have an email address that matches the domain, and those that have general ones. So now you get a form, and the service is not receiving funding from MSD. Then what you could go through here is the same approach that you could go for someone that has got those extra emails, and that is to send that follow-up email using the information provided for a mentor identity check. And then again, as I just spoke about, you could already have an arrangement with that service around just understanding their vetting policies and procedures, and having that in your back pocket and knowing that has taken place and you are comfortable, that the identity aspect has been met. Now, what we did do is in the next step around this is, once you are satisfied, say if a service, a mentor comes from an accredited service, or you've gone through your mentor check and you are your mentor identity check process, if they are not, or they come from a service that has a generic email. What we've heard up time and time again is that business would want to do this next step of the additional check. So that would be the organization reaching out directly to the reaching out directly to the client to verify that this correct, and this is something that they're comfortable and they want to take forward. So really, it's sort of like, if you think about it, it's that two level. It's that, I want to say almost, institutional satisfaction in terms of that this is a service, a legitimate service, legitimate email, legitimate person. So you've got that title, and then there's that customer aspect, which is, does this person give, consent, and are they happy with it? So those are the two. Now, we're aware that we are aware, and I'm jumping around, my apology, it's my arrows, I don't know why they jump. We are very aware that the telecommunications sector was an area that people were experiencing difficulty. So we worked with them, and specifically with 1NZ, to understand the process, and 1NZ has decided to take this process on board as part of their own verification procedures to try, to make it smoother and quicker to be able for financial mentors to be able to assist customers. So they took our recommended process, and they themselves have adapted it. This system that I'm speaking to here now has gone live, and it is available on Tāpapa. So just around what is specific to theirs that you might find interesting, because you will be familiar with the rest as I've just gone through that process, is that 1NZ has set up a dedicated email now that's live, and that is where they will be expecting the privacy waivers from services to go to. They won't be taking them in any other way now, but through this email address, which is now live. And then once they receive that privacy waiver, they will then go through that process that we've spoken about. They themselves are looking around understanding staff vetting processes for services that are not BFC funded, to work as a way to also accelerate being able to give approval and get things going quicker for the customer. So they are looking at that as well. So when we look at this process around NZ that is now live, what they have said in terms of their own privacy waivers is that a maximum of 3 months access will be given from the time a form is verified. And if it goes beyond 3 months, so that's the duration for how long it's valid for, a new form will be required. And the information that will be supplied will be balances and due dates and status of the account, which I imagine would be required. Plan types, copies of invoices, addresses, call logs won't be provided. And that has to do with, imagine, around the whole privacy element of it. So this is the process. This is the process that they've adopted, and we've been really, really happy to work and to be able to put this to you to say that it has been adapted. I am aware that possibly people on this call were looking for some sort of, Uber answer, if I can use that as an example, where we had people say to us, it should be a central database where everybody is listed and it's just a one-stop shop, and yes, that is ultimately what will happen as FinCap moves with their own professionalisation process. But as I said, this is an interim solution, and it is an interim solution that we hope will support your own business's own processes in verifying mentors. And on the mentor side, we'll be able to provide quicker and easier support for you as you assist clients and customers who are in significant financial distress. At this time, I'd like to thank you for listening. Kate's going to let me know if there's any questions now. Please, if there's anything you think of after the fact, please feel free to reach out. Kate or I or both, we're always very keen to engage and discuss this further. So thank you very, very much for your time.
All right. Thanks, Tracy. Yes, it is. It's awesome that 1NZ have taken on this process. And hopefully all of the financial mentors and budget services on this call will see the difference that it makes. And I'd love to hear any feedback that you have. All right, we're going to move on now and just wrap things up.
Oh, sorry. I should have had that screen on.
That's okay. All good. So just before we close off, wanted to shout out to our philanthropic funders, so BNZ Foundation and Tyndall Foundation, that help make this work possible, and also the business coalition partners. So we've had a few involved in this first tranche of work, which has been awesome. And their funding has enabled us to engage with the community sector in particular and ensure that community are remunerated for participating in things like the workshops that we've held. So yeah, it's really important. We know that resources are really stretched, capacity is overflowing, you don't have capacity to do stuff, and it's really difficult to step into spaces like this and do collaborative work because you've just got the basics that you've got to get on top of. So yeah, that funding has enabled us to do that, which is awesome. And just a shout out, I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that we're now shifting into a focus on economic and financial safety with a particular priority on older New Zealanders. Tim, if you just go to the next slide, just letting you know that our next webinar is at the end of April, so the 29th of April at lunchtime. And we're delighted to have Danielle Oakes from Te Ahi Ka speak about the awesome toolkit that she has worked on. She led the development of it. It was a collaborative effort with a whole bunch of other organisations, but it's called Kete Te Aki, and it's a toolkit designed for anyone who works with older people. And so that's both essential service businesses, but also community organisations. And she is a font of knowledge. And I think it'll be a really awesome webinar, and hopefully everyone who joins will take a few hot tips and things to think about away with them. So we'd encourage you to sign up for that. There'll be more coming out in the next couple of days on this one. And then I think we'll just close off now with karakia whakamutunga. So unahia ki te uru tapanui, ki wātia, ki mama, tīnākau, te tinana te wairua i te ara tangata, koia rā e rongo, whakaerea, āki runga, kia tīna, hui e, tai ki e. Thanks everyone. Lovely to see you.
Bye-bye. Thanks everybody. Going to end it in the meeting.